you can better perhaps use it as ambient sound. So you walk into a space, you hear lots of voices. You don't necessarily hear the individual voices, but you hear a sense of the voices. So you're using it, and I know installation artists have done this very successfully. Ricky was talking to me about a symphony of voices in Volos, which sounded fantastic, and we've done similar things in the UK. So you can use the oral history in an artistic way for the sound rather than the information. You can put listening posts in with headphones. I'll show you some examples. They can be sound showers rather than headphones. But increasingly we're looking at audio, new technology, QR codes, NFC codes, in other words using mobile, portable phones and so on. I'll give you some examples. And then to pick up the Volos example we heard earlier, sound trails, either downloadable apps, or I'll show you some other examples as we go along. So, first example, one of my favourite museums in the world is the District 6 Museum in Cape Town, South Africa. Has anyone been? Yes. Yes, a couple of people.
It's wonderful.
It's absolutely fantastic museum for all sorts of reasons. But basically what happened is under apartheid, this whole district was bulldozed and destroyed by the apartheid regime. Everyone that lived there was sent all over South Africa. So what the museum did, in the one remaining significant building left, was to reconstruct, Ron Greeley's phrase, reconstruct the community using oral history. And they did it in all sorts of ways. They collected lots of photographs from all these disparate people from all over South Africa, and you can see right at the top there, they used oral history, and they had lots of clips of the oral history. But the real centre point was this map. On the floor of this massive space was a visual map representation of the community that had been destroyed. And then you probably can't see, but what people did, they came along and they wrote on the map who lived in those houses. And sometimes there'd be little memories and things. So they were recreating in a mix of sort of maps and photographs and memories the community as it had existed before it was destroyed. It's simple but very effective, and you can see how oral history was used. Another example, these are two exhibitions that we've done recently, and if you look, you can't imagine an aesthetic more different, can you, than District 6, which is a bit homemade. This is the Tate Britain Gallery in London, and this was a recent exhibition that we did where we tried something quite challenging for the art curators, which was to put the sound right in the middle of the gallery. Now, art curators don't like this sort of thing. They don't like having all the art around the outside and the oral history in the middle. Normally they like the art in the middle and like the oral history around the outside, preferably in one corner so that the visitors know that it's there. So this is, as far as I know, the first exhibition that the Tate have ever put on, which puts sound at the centre of the gallery. And what we did with a whole series of touch screens that you see there is to encourage people to, as they come into the galleries, to go to the sound, touch the screen, listen to the sound, listen to the artists talking about their work. But we also, what we wanted them to do is to think about how the art arrived in the gallery. So there's lots of descriptions there of the relationship between the gallery who bought the artwork from the art dealer who represented the artist. So this triangular relationship within the gallery was one that we were exploring through oral history. Also quite challenging for people like the Tate who don't like to give away how much they paid for objects in their collection. So it was challenging on a number of levels, and rather different, I think, from the District 6 one. And there's a number of features here that I'll come back to later, but you'll see the seats here. These are touch screens. There's headphones. This is another exhibition we did recently. Again, comfortable seating is really vital if you're going to encourage people to dwell and listen to sound in a gallery. We'll come back to that. Another example of an exhibition that's just opened at the British Library, And we broke the rules here. One of the rules, I think, when you're going to play people oral history, is you tell them what they're listening to, or you explain to them what they're listening to. So we broke the rules here. We had something that said listen, and there were headphones, but there was no information about what was going to be on the headphones. So the idea was that people came to it, they listened to it, and then they had to begin to understand what it was they were hearing. I'm not sure how successful it's been, but it was a challenge at least. But more importantly, what we tried to do is we created these little pods that you can see here, and there's 100 audio clips on this little touchscreen. And the idea is that people come and sit in this little pod for as long as they like, and people are spending hours in there, you know, which is brilliant, because again, what you want people to do is to dwell with the sound, explore the sound in various ways. So that's traditional way just of headphones, but then having a touch screen. And these units are not nowadays that expensive, but I think we've broken another rule here by having someone standing in a corridor. I think if you're going to have sound in an exhibition, don't put it in the corridor. Put it somewhere where it's either on the front or there's an opportunity for people to dwell. Now, I'm giving you this, I put best practice question mark. I don't think this is best practice. I think this is an example of a lovely space, but let's just remember what I said a moment ago about the way that Tate tucked the audio. Here we got all the artworks all over the place, and here it is tucked away here. This little lad here is listening on this. There's nothing to look at. He doesn't understand probably what it is he's listening to. It's completely, it's unhitched from everything that's happening in the space. So, okay, it's great that there's some sound in the gallery, but it could have been done much better. There's a seat, which is great, but let's see a little bit more visual representation around the actual audio. This is my classic bad example of how not to use oral history in a museum display. It's our friends, the Imperial War Museum, with their Blitz exhibition. And they've got a fantastic oral history collection at the Imperial War Museum. I'm really pleased they're starting to use it. So what do? 2 phones, that says eyewitness, that's it. Nothing else. Nothing else there at all. This is about this wide, so you can't even stand in it. There's no information there, it doesn't tell you how long, what you're listening to, how long. There's nothing to control the volume, there's no illustrations, there's no objects nearby that you can look at. It's completely ripped away from the context. And it's one of the worst examples that I'm going to show you this evening. So I hope none of you are doing this. Okay, fantastic example. This is the light box in Woking. Now, they tick all my boxes of what the best thing to do if you're using oral history in a gallery. Number 1, there's a seat. So you can sit down, and most people, when they're listening, they won't stand for more than about a minute, maybe 2 minutes, 3 at the outside. They like to sit down, and they can move the chair around, which is, it's simple but very important. Number 2, there's a link between the audio and the object. So as you're listening, you can see the object. Number 3, there's some text there telling you that this section is all about play, basically. What's that saying? Woking at play. It's just a place, it's called Woking. So it gives you the context, and then a series of buttons that you press, and each one tells you what you're hearing. It tells you who the person is, tells you how long it's going to go on for, and it tells you how it relates to the objects. So it's very straightforward. It's in a discrete area, it's not in a corridor, so you don't feel you're being knocked by people all the time. You're sitting, reflecting, looking at the objects. There's lots of things to look at. And importantly, you'll see these little logos there. This shows that this is actually got a loop system for people with hearing impaired, hearing disabilities. So as they walk into the area and they press the button so that it picks it up through their hearing aids on a loop system. So it's very disability oriented as well. So very good example of what you can do if you're doing it well. Another good example is an exhibition that was about refugees at the Museum of London, which is a fantastic oral history project. And what they've done here is that they've actually, rather than having something flat on the wall, they've actually used tabletops and they've put the objects into glass on the tabletop. So the oral history and the photographs around the outside, but also they've allowed 2 or 3 people to listen at the same time. One of the things about sound and oral history in galleries is that people often feel quite isolated as they're wandering around. So it's great for more than one person to listen at the same time. Another great example, this is a museum about orphans called the Foundling Museum. Very low budget, they have virtually no money for this exhibition. And they came up with the idea of having these tiny little speakers that hung down from the ceiling at different levels. And of course, if you have a speaker that's child level, the children come and listen to it. You know, the higher ones for taller people like me and so on. And then they hung them all around. They've all got different oral history extracts on them. And then they themed them into different areas of the gallery. So this is about retirement and how orphans who'd had that experience in children's home, how they now cope with retirement. So what do you do for retirement? You have an armchair, very cheap, you sit in it and you listen to people talking about their experiences of retirement. Very simple, incredibly effective and incredibly popular. Lots of people came to see this exhibit. It's still one of the best budget ones that I've seen that uses oral history. Another example is where you can use historic objects to trigger sound. So this is the Story of Berlin Museum in Berlin, and if you open these little cabinets, so it triggers sound. And they've also got some books, you press the book and then you get a little video that tells you about it. So you can use